Caleb Winter had stopped looking people in the eyes. Ever since his mother's accident, the world felt like it had lost its color. People spoke, but their words floated around him, never reaching his heart. His father worked late, barely speaking at dinner. His friends had become strangers who didn't know what to say anymore. But across the street, there was always her. Every day at 4 p.m., the curtains would pull back, and Agnes Moran would appear by the window of her old brick house. She sat in a worn-out armchair, a cup of tea on the table beside her, and a book resting on her lap. She never seemed to read it. She just stared out, as if watching for something that never came. The town called her Murderer Moran. They said she had killed her own baby decades ago and had been hiding in that house ever since. Kids dared each other to run past her porch. Parents whispered warnings to their children. Nobody really knew what happened, but that didn't stop them from speaking as if they did. Caleb didn't believe the stories. But he didn't disbelieve them either. He was too broken himself to care about old rumors. Yet, every day, without fail, Agnes would lift her hand and give him a small wave from across the street. Caleb never waved back. Not at first. But over time, it became impossible not to. It was the only human connection that didn't feel forced. One rainy afternoon, as Caleb sat on his bed staring out the window, he noticed something different. Agnes wasn't sitting in her usual chair. The window remained closed. He waited. An hour passed. Then two. His heart started racing in a way he couldn't explain. He told himself it was none of his business. She was probably fine. But a strange worry wouldn't leave his chest. Finally, at dusk, the curtains twitched. The window opened just a crack, and a piece of paper pressed against the glass. The words, scribbled in shaky handwriting, were simple but chilling. "Help me." Caleb's breath caught. He blinked, thinking he imagined it. But the paper remained. She didn't move. She didn't wave. Just sat there, fragile and small, holding up that message like a white flag. For a moment, his mind wrestled. He wasn't supposed to care. He wasn't supposed to get involved. That's what everyone would say. Stay away from that house. Stay away from her. But grief changes you. It strips away the rules he used to follow. Caleb grabbed his hoodie, slipped out the back door, and crossed the street. His heart thudded so loud it drowned out the wind. When he reached her porch, the old wooden door opened before he could knock. Agnes stood there, smaller up close, wrapped in a thick shawl. Her eyes were clouded, as if time had been unkind to them. "You came," she said, voice soft, barely a whisper. "I saw your sign," Caleb replied, unsure of what else to say. Agnes smiled, but it was sad. "Most people see. Few answer." He hesitated. "Are you in danger?" She looked at him for a long moment, then stepped aside to let him in. The house smelled of old paper and lavender. It was neat, but everything felt frozen in time. Family photos lined the walls, but their faces had faded. Agnes led him to the living room and pointed at a pile of letters on the coffee table. The envelopes were pale yellow, with no return address. "I've been getting these for months," she said. "At first, I ignored them. But they've gotten uglier." Caleb picked one up. The words inside were scrawled in red ink. "Murderer, you'll pay soon." He felt a chill run down his spine. "Have you told the police?" he asked. Agnes laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They stopped listening to me a long time ago." Caleb looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't what the stories made her out to be. She wasn't a monster hiding in the dark. She was just a lonely woman, swallowed by rumors that never died. And now, someone wanted to make her suffer. "I can help," he said, surprising even himself. Agnes's eyes softened. "That's a brave thing to say." It was the first time in months Caleb felt his heart beat for someone other than himself. But as he glanced at the letters again, a dark realization crept in. The stories about Agnes might not be dead. Someone was bringing them back to life, and they had no intention of stopping. And just like that, Caleb Winter's quiet, invisible life had been cracked open. He didn't know it yet, but the simple act of crossing that street would change everything. The next few days felt like Caleb had stepped into a different world. Every afternoon after school, he found himself at Agnes's house. It was a quiet routine. They'd sit by the window, sipping tea, while Caleb read aloud the letters that kept coming. Each one was worse than the last. The words were sharp, dripping with hatred, as if the sender wanted to peel away whatever peace Agnes had left. But Agnes never flinched. She listened with a calm that unnerved Caleb. Like she had been expecting this. "Why do they hate you so much?" Caleb asked one evening, his voice almost breaking. "You don't deserve this." Agnes turned her gaze to the window, where dusk painted the street in soft orange light. "Hatred doesn't need a reason, Caleb. It just needs a story. And people are too eager to believe the ones that make them feel better about themselves." He didn't know what to say to that. But he knew one thing. He was tired of the whispers. Tired of how people could destroy someone's life without ever knowing them. One night, as Caleb was about to leave, Agnes handed him an old, yellowed envelope. "This," she said, "was the police report from that night. I've never shown it to anyone. But maybe it's time you read it." At home, Caleb sat at his desk, heart pounding as he unfolded the fragile paper. The words blurred for a moment as his eyes stung, but he forced himself to read every line. The report said Agnes's infant son had died from a rare genetic illness. No signs of harm, no bruises, no struggle. It had been a sudden, tragic loss. But the rumors that followed were faster than facts. The town had already judged her before the ink dried. Caleb clenched his fists. This wasn't just gossip. This was a life ruined by lies. But why now? Why were the letters coming after all these years? The next day, Caleb went to the school library. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he felt there was a missing piece. He found old newspaper archives, flipping through faded pages until a headline caught his eye. "Businessman Declan Moran acquitted in domestic abuse case. Wife remains under suspicion." Caleb's stomach twisted. Agnes's late husband had been a prominent figure in town. He had friends in high places. According to the article, Agnes had tried to press charges against him, but the case mysteriously fell apart. The same year their baby died. The picture of Agnes in the article wasn't the woman Caleb knew. She looked younger, but her eyes held the same tired sadness. The article barely mentioned her side of the story. "Is this what you wanted to hide from me, Agnes?" Caleb whispered. But it wasn't over. He found another piece, buried in the classified section. A birth announcement. "Eleanor Moran gives birth to son, September 12, 1985. Eleanor Moran? That wasn't Agnes's name. His heart raced as pieces started fitting together. He rushed back to Agnes's house, questions spilling out before he could knock. Agnes sat by the window, as always, but when she turned, her face was pale. "You found the other son, didn't you?" she asked quietly. Caleb froze. "What do you mean other son?" Agnes sighed. "Declan had another child. A son from an affair. He was never part of my life. But after my baby died, the boy was sent away to live with relatives. Declan wanted no mistakes in his perfect family image. That boy grew up believing I abandoned him." Caleb felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. "And you think he's the one sending the letters?" "I don't think, Caleb. I know." It was then the doorbell rang. Agnes's face drained of color. Through the frosted glass, a silhouette stood. A man, broad-shouldered, holding an envelope in his hand. Caleb's pulse quickened. This wasn't a game. This was real. The ghosts of Agnes's past had come knocking. And Caleb was no longer a bystander. Caleb's breath was shallow as he stood beside Agnes, staring at the blurred figure behind the door. "Stay behind me," she whispered, though her voice trembled. But Caleb didn't move. His heart was pounding too hard to obey. The door creaked open, and a man in his late 30s stepped into the doorway. He was tall, with sharp cheekbones and cold, distant eyes. He held the envelope between two fingers like it was a weapon. "You've been expecting me, haven't you, Agnes?" the man said. Agnes stood straighter. "If you came here to deliver another letter, save yourself the trouble. Caleb here reads them for me now." The man's gaze shifted to Caleb, narrowing. And who's this? Another fool who believes your lies. Caleb's fists clenched. I'm not here to listen to gossip. Why don't you tell her who you are? The man smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was bitter. I'm what she left behind. The mistake she never wanted. Agnes's face tightened, but her voice remained soft. Your name is Jonas, isn't it? He nodded slowly. That's what they called me. But you wouldn't know that, would you? You never cared enough to find out. Caleb could feel the tension like a storm about to break. He wanted to shout, to throw the letters back at Jonas and demand answers. But Agnes spoke first. I tried to see you. After Declan sent you away, I searched. He made sure I never found you. Convenient, Jonas sneered. The same year your baby dies, the same year I get dumped in a stranger's house. You never looked back. That's not true, Agnes whispered, her shoulders shaking. But Jonas wasn't listening. He stepped forward, towering over her. Caleb moved in between them. What do you want from her? Caleb demanded. I want her to feel what it's like to be erased, Jonas said, his voice low and dangerous. For decades, she's lived in this house like a ghost. I'm just here to finish the job. Agnes's eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall. Jonas, I don't need your forgiveness. I only need you to know the truth. Jonas laughed, hollow and sharp. I've heard your truth. The town's heard your truth. It's always the same story. No, it's not, Caleb snapped. You haven't heard my truth. Jonas looked at him, confused. My mother died 3 months ago, Caleb said, his voice cracking. Car accident. She was the kindest person I knew. But now, people look at me with pity like they've already decided who I'm supposed to be. You think you know Agnes because of stories other people told you. I thought I knew grief too, but I didn't. Not until I met her. Jonas's face hardened, but his hands trembled. Do you even know how your brother died? Caleb asked, stepping closer. It wasn't her. It was an illness. I saw the police report. You've been punishing a woman who lost her child, just like you lost a mother. The room went silent. Jonas's mouth opened, but no words came out. His grip on the envelope loosened, and it drifted to the floor. Agnes sat down, her voice soft but unbreakable. You've hated a stranger for so long, Jonas. But I was never a stranger. I've carried you in my heart longer than you can imagine. The weight of those words hung in the air. Jonas looked at her, not with anger this time, but with something more complicated. Confusion. Hurt. A child's longing hidden in a man's face. I don't know how to believe you, he said, voice cracking. You don't have to, Agnes replied. Not yet. But you can sit down. Caleb's chest ached as Jonas slowly, hesitantly, took a seat across from her. For the first time, the war of silence between them cracked open, not with apologies, but with the simple act of sharing space. The past couldn't be erased, but maybe, just maybe, it could be rewritten. The house had never been so quiet. Agnes, Jonas, and Caleb sat around the small coffee table, the bitter letters lying untouched between them. Outside, the world carried on. Cars passed, dogs barked, neighbors whispered, but inside, time seemed to stand still. Caleb watched Jonas closely. The man's rigid posture had softened, but his face still held a storm. Years of bitterness don't vanish in an afternoon. I always imagined you as a monster, Jonas said suddenly, his voice low. A cold, heartless woman who tossed me away because I was inconvenient. Agnes didn't flinch. You have every right to be angry, Jonas. But the story you were told is not the story I lived. Jonas looked away, his fingers tapping nervously against his knee. Declan. He was different behind closed doors. He made sure I knew I was a mistake. That my existence was a stain. Agnes's eyes softened, a glimmer of shared pain passing between them. He did the same to me. You were never the mistake, Jonas. The mistake was believing him. For a long moment, Jonas said nothing. His jaw clenched, as if fighting an invisible battle inside himself. Then, In a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, "Why didn't you fight for me?" Agnes's throat tightened. "I did. But I wasn't strong enough. He had money, power, and friends who made my words disappear. They buried me alive in this house. I lost one son to death, and another to lies." Jonas's eyes glassed over. His chest heaved as if carrying years of weight. Caleb felt his own heart ache. He wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all, at how stories, when twisted, could destroy entire lives. But then, something happened. Jonas reached for one of the letters on the table. He unfolded it, stared at the hateful words, and then tore it in half. Then again, and again, until nothing but scraps remained. Agnes watched him with trembling hands, but said nothing. "I don't know how to forgive you," Jonas admitted, his voice hoarse. "But maybe I can start by unlearning the hate." Caleb let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The air in the room seemed lighter, as if the house itself had been waiting for those words. That evening, as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, Caleb stood at the doorway, watching Jonas and Agnes share their first real conversation. It was awkward, with long pauses and unsure smiles, but it was real. There were no more letters. No more walls. Before Caleb left, Agnes called out to him. "Caleb," she said, standing by the window. "Thank you for seeing me. For crossing the street when no one else would." He smiled. "You waved first." She chuckled softly, and Jonas, sitting nearby, gave a small grin of his own. As Caleb walked home, he felt something shift inside him. He had stepped into a story that wasn't his, and somehow, it had helped him begin to heal his own wounds. The world still carried its whispers, but now, he knew the power of looking beyond them. From that day on, the window across the street wasn't a place of rumors anymore. It was a place where broken hearts had learned to mend. And sometimes, all it takes is one person to cross the street. Judging people by whispers blinds us to who they really are. Listening with an open heart can heal what hate has broken. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that inspire, challenge, and stay with you.